Welcome back, everybody, to The Writer Reads Chapter 1. This week's reading list, we're taking it from Book 3 in the Mac and Me and Odyssey series. This is Chapter 1 of Mac and Me, Arak. Chapter 1, Boarding Party. The Arak materialized in the ship's canteen. I had turned away from the counter with a cup of tea in my hand when the air in front of me shuddered. Funny one, Mac, I thought, but I backed up a step just the same. No way was I going to let him spoil my first cup of the morning. And then the air grew solid, and I saw a face I knew, one that still came to me in nightmares. I dropped the tea. Kinda. Actually, I tossed the tea, cup and all, at the creature standing before me. Oh, he might look like a man, but he wasn't. He was Arak, and spiders still scared the crap out of me. I tossed the tea, and I was back over the canteen counter and reversing toward the stovetop when Mac arrived. His hand on my arm yanked me sideways, saving my ass, quite literally, from a nasty burn. And then he pulled me up against his front and wrapped an arm around me, while the other pulled an A-level blaster and leveled it across the counter. "I told you not to come back," he said, and the Arak smiled. I glimpsed fangs, reversed away from it, and didn't move an inch. Mac was a solid wall behind me, his arm a bar of iron over my chest. More air shimmered, and the few crew who were in the canteen were gone before the rest of the Arak team arrived. A whimper clawed its way out of my throat, and I froze. Tremors shook me, but I couldn't move. The Arak regarded Mac's blaster, regarded Mac, and regarded me. And that damned smile didn't shift. We were in it but deep. "We have more work for you to do," it said. "And I told you no more," Mac retorted. He had? Somewhere in my mind that registered as something he'd done for me. It was almost sweet. "You also said you don't say no when you can't outrun us," the Arak replied, and Mac swore. Yeah, pretty much what he said. We'd been bugged and we hadn't even known it. Tens had some explaining to do. And then the Arak looked at me. Most frightening thing I'd seen in a long line of things that scare. The tea had hit it mid-chest, staining its suit and shirt and tie. I mentioned this thing looked like a man, right? Yeah? Well, it was wearing a suit. All business, these Arak, when they weren't slaughtering each other's clans or taking over planets under the guise of being traders. This one looked at me, glanced down at its suit, and looked me right in the eye. I went weak at the knees, and so not in a good way. "You owe me blood," it said, and my knees gave way. Not that this monster was going to know it. Mac's arm tightened, kept me from sliding to the floor. I grabbed hold of my vision, stopped it wavering, stopped the blur that meant I was about to go to black. Couldn't stop the shakes. Still couldn't move. Mac lowered his blaster. That was a good thing. A-levels were not ship-safe weapons, and I didn't want to try breathing vacuum. Although, given what we were sharing our air with, that was starting to look mighty tempting. Mac's voice in my head carried through to the crew. We all had implants, and the internal net cut down on chatter. "All hands to lockdown. We've been boarded." Across the counter, the Arak smirked. Behind him, his team drew their weapons. 3 covered the door, 4 covered us. It was like they knew we were talking, and what the response would be. "No can do, Captain. They have the bridge." Fear became a solid ball in my chest, and I wanted to be sick. Mac's arm kept me at his front. "We've hacked your net, too," the Arak said, inside our heads. Inside all our heads. And I felt Mac tense. He had good reason, too. If the Arak had hacked our net and held our ship, and they definitely hacked our security if they'd been able to teleport aboard, they really did have us. Tens sure as shit had some explaining to do. And then a ton of work to find out how they'd managed it and make sure they couldn't manage it again. And me, 'cause I sure as shit had a bullet in this shooting match, and then Tens was going to want another round on the mats. I wondered if he'd let me live this time, if we lived at all. Mac started to holster his blaster, but the Arak raised their weapons and I saw their safeties flicked off. The Arak leader gestured to the counter. Still as tense as hell, Mac carefully put the A level on the counter, and I found I'd stopped shaking. Funny thing about terror, you can only be terrified for so long. After that, it settles down to a manageable level. Mac knew this, and knew I'd been put through part of an Arak desensitization program on the last mission. He was probably hoping it would be enough. Enough for what, I sure as shit didn't know, but I found I could stand on my own again. Discovered, too, that I preferred to stay just where I was. Mac was warm. He was shelter. And I wanted his arm around me, damn it. The Arak leader watched us, and if I hadn't known better, I would have thought he was reading my mind. Now there was a thought that didn't bear considering, but it got me thinking about implants and what could be accessed through them. And it turned out I did know better. Oh, hell no. I looked at the Arak, really looked at him, met his eyes, and I saw he knew exactly what had been on my mind. That smirk widened into a smile and a wink, and then all humour left his face. "You know where the meeting room is," he said, and turned away. Mac and I watched him walk back through his team and out the canteen door. We watched as the first 3 members of his team preceded him into the corridor, and 2 followed. The last 2 kept their weapons on us and then gestured we should follow. "Don't keep me waiting," echoed in our heads. I studied the communications and saw it was set for us alone. "You mobile?" Mac asked, and I nodded. "Can you talk?" I tried. Yeah. Good. He unwound his arm from my chest but kept it draped across my shoulders. Either he didn't want me leaving all of a sudden, or he'd caught that thought about me wanting his arm around me. I was betting on the former. I'd wanted his arms around me before, and he hadn't obliged.